Everybody, we've got a large live audience here. So those of you that are watching on Zoom, you do not get to feel the energy that we have in this room. So I feel sad for you guys, but we're going to make the best of it that we can for you guys to make sure that your experience is as good, if not better, than those that are here in front of us. So that being said, my name is Rob Oakey. I'm actually your principal broker, and I'm one of the founders and owners of the company. If we haven't had the opportunity of meeting, I've been doing this. I got my license back in '94. I've been doing this for a little bit of time, done one or two transactions. So hopefully we're going to be able to go over some information today that will help you do one or two transactions or a little bit, or maybe more. So if you are online, try to put your mic on so that we don't hear any background noise. But if you do have a question, feel free to chime in. Otherwise, if I'm getting a bunch of background noise, then I'll tell you to just to mute yourself. So if that sounds good. Well, the whole purpose of today's class is to make it as interactive as possible, that you guys are understanding what we're going to be covering. Normally, when I teach this class, like at Stringham, it's a 4-hour class that I'm now having to condense in 2 hours. So there are things that I'm going to spend more time on. And then there's other sections I'm going to just blow through. That doesn't necessarily mean that the areas that we blow through are not important. But what I'm going to try to focus on are things that'll help you understand to make sure that your license is protected, that we as a company are protected for these key areas. And then we'll also give you some guidance and advice. Hopefully, some of you have actually had the opportunity to actually do some real estate transactions, or at least write some offers. If you have, that will help a lot in what we're going to be covering. I kind of make this as a blanket statement. I get questions, as you can imagine, often. And people ask, what does the contracts, if I were to do X, what does the contract mean? Or what does this section mean? And the majority of the time, people are asking the question, and the contract is written pretty well that the average person, actually, I would say below average person, should be able to understand it. It's pretty clear language. It's not, there are many contracts, as you can imagine, attorneys write that are intended for only attorneys to understand. They use a lot of legal language, legalese, legal terms that by stating an actual, like lis pendens, for example, that's a term that we use in real estate. Means that a property is being upheld in court. There's basically a lien on a property, and that lis pendens needs to be removed in order to be able to sell it. But that's the type of example people believe that the contracts are written. So they ask me a question before they've even read either the contract or the section that might answer their question. So the first bit of advice is, if you have not read this, I would highly encourage you to read it, because you're asking your clients to sign information that you don't even know yourself. You may know where a blank is, and you've read the word, a couple of words before or after the blank, so you know what to fill in. But I promise you, if you have read the contract and understand the contract, it will make your life so much easier, because I guarantee it, the agent that you're going to be, in essence, working against to some extent, there's a good chance they haven't read it. And if you understand it better than they do, it's extremely empowering. and it makes the job much easier. Now, that being said, I do want to point this out. I am not an attorney. People often come up to me and say, yeah, I've got a legal question for you, or I understand that you're our legal counsel. No, I am not an attorney. I do handle the situations that escalate to our attorneys. And, but again, been doing this for a while. So that being said, we're going to dive right in, and believe it or not, about 20 minutes might be focused on this first paragraph. And the reason for it is because this first paragraph is an area that if we don't understand the severity of it, then this is one area that the division could come and literally would be that big of a deal that you and I could lose our license because of this. This deals with earnest money specifically. And when we are responsible for the public's money, that's when the division takes it very seriously. So that being said, the first part talks about the offer date, who the parties are, buyer and seller. And then if we had a copy that you could actually read, it would say that with this offer, we are delivering an amount of earnest money in the form of whether it be a personal check, wire transfer. Well, actually, we're not doing wire transfer. Cashier's check, money order. So those are the first key lines. It's this last section that I want to talk about. These last two lines, it actually says, after acceptance of the REPC by buyer and seller and receipt of earnest money. So that first line is implying something has happened, which is actually addressed up above here. So let's take a step back. It says the buyer and seller, the property described below and agrees to deliver no later than 4 calendar days after acceptance an earnest money deposit of an amount of X. So this first timeline, when we are making an offer, we have how much time. It says after acceptance, how many days after acceptance do we have to turn in earnest money? What's the answer?
4 calendar days.
Okay, we have up to, no later than, so up to 4 calendar days to receive that earnest money. And it says, described below, agrees to deliver earnest money deposit in the other. Okay, so what does, who is that that's receiving it? Does it have to, is it you? Is it the company? Is it your spouse? Who
Receiving the money or the earnest money receipt?
The earnest money check, the earnest money. And we're not receiving cash.
Okay.
So who's receiving the earnest money?
The brokerage.
The brokerage, that is the right answer. But that also could be, who also represents the brokerage?
Me.
Yeah.
You as the agent as well, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so either one of those answers are correct. It could either be you, the agent, or they could bring it to us as the company. Either way. At the end of the day, it's the brokerage or the representative that is receiving the earnest money. Now, is it possible that that earnest money is given to you before you have gone under contract on a property? And if you're listening online, please chime in as well.
We shouldn't be accepting it.
Okay, what if you're, so let me give an example. And this is how I intend to do stuff. I'm going to be asking questions and using actual examples to help you think of the other stuff. So you have a client that has come in just for the weekend to go under contract on a property, hopefully. Okay, so they fly in today, and now today's Friday. They're gone on Sunday at noon, and you go look at 10 properties over the next today and tomorrow, and you write an offer on one Saturday night. They're leaving Sunday at, let's say, 10 a.m. So you write the offer Sunday at 7 p.m. but you're giving them until Monday to make a decision. And now your client's gone Sunday. So if they go under contract, once it goes under contract, they've got 4 calendar days to get it to us.
Correct.
So we have solutions to solve this problem. But if they're physically not here, does that make it more difficult to get earnest money from them?
Shouldn't, because they should be able to wire or ACH transfer, right?
Okay, so wire and ACH are different.
Yeah.
But so we don't typically do a wire.
Or,
And ACH we do.
so I have a question about that actually. So,
Okay.
when you write in the form of like either check, wire, or ACH, so since I guess came to the Century 21, you guys don't do wire, you guys do ACH transfers. So do we have to start putting, would it be recommended to put ACH transfer instead of wire in the?
So what is it that we do that requires an ACH? Do you know what that is?
No.
Okay, so this is where I was going to go. We have a software company that we use called Earnest.
Yes,
Earnest.
Earnest.
Which is what allows, they do an ACH payment.
Yeah.
So we can give our client, so this is a method. So if your client flew back, if your client now is flying back out of town, they go under contract, we can give them the instructions to use Earnest.
Mhm.
And yes, they can go ahead and make the payment, which is an ACH payment on it. And so what I would recommend, because I've never seen anybody try to make if we wrote ACH and they brought in a check, I've never seen it go that direction, but I would say yes, be as accurate as possible, because if they did, I'd have to look at it from a legal perspective, is whether it was received ACH or money order, the client's not damaged.
Okay.
The earnest money is received, there's no damage that would be there. So I would think that would be hard for them to defend that or make a claim that was not, they didn't honor the contract.
Yeah. But
I'll use a different example in just a second, where damages could be implied. Yeah. But in that particular example, what the question is in the form of a check, wire, ACH, should you start using ACH if they're going ACH payment, if they're going to use Earnest, versus if they said money order, but then they end up using Earnest? The answer to that question is try to be as accurate as possible what you believe is going to be used. But if you put money order and they end up doing the ACH payment, I don't think it's going to be a problem. Okay. I wouldn't be as concerned about that. I'll share something differently that would be a problem. Okay. So go back to my original question. If we didn't have if we didn't have Earnest, that client leaving out of town would be a problem then, right? Yeah. Because the chances of them to be able to get their earnest money to us in a timely manner within that 4-day window is going to be very difficult to do. So in answer to your question, can they leave a check for you? Absolutely they can. Now the difference here is you're not going to deposit it with the company until you go under contract. Correct. But you would hold the check yourself until you found out the results. Now, are there times I've had times where a client, they try multiple properties, doesn't go under contract, now they change their mind. Great, client, how do you want me to do this? Here, I can take a picture of voiding it back before, live camera or whatever, but back in the day, you take a picture of it. Here's the voided check. I can even email the voided check back to you or mail it back to you. You want me to just tear it up right here and take a picture of it torn up? What do you want me to do? Just ask the question, no big deal. Okay. So, but where I'm going with it is, let's say that they did leave a check with you before they flew out of town. So you've made the offer on a Saturday night. They fly out 10 o'clock the next morning. When you write up the offer and you met with them, or when you were showing a property, because you also knew that when you write up the offer that night, it's probably going to be at your house on the computer. So while you're showing property, they write you an earnest money check for $5,000. Now you don't have a property address part of it, but you got an earnest money check for $5,000 written to Century 21 Everest Trust account. Now you're holding it. You've got it with you. So now you write the offer. I've got the check on Saturday. The offer gets accepted on Monday. When did the clock start ticking? Did it start ticking?
Acceptance.
The acceptance on Monday.
Okay, good job. That was a trick question. The clock did not tick once I received it.
Yeah.
Because it says after acceptance,
Yeah.
the clock starts ticking. Here's the next trick question. You've already got you've got the check. Now you got accepted on Monday. So how many days do you have to get that, to receive that check? And this is a trick question, just so you know.
Wait, you already have
You
the
have
check.
4.
though. Yeah, you have 4 calendar days to deposit it though.
Haven't gotten that yet. I said, how many days do you have to receive it? You started off on the right steps.
Still 4 calendar days, right?
Okay, but you said something before 4 calendar days. What did you say? The question is, believe it or not, there are 2 dates that are here. There are 2 dates. The first one is we have 4 calendar days after acceptance to receive it. But you received it 2 days before you went under contract. So how many days at that point do you have to receive the check? 0. You've already met that condition.
Yeah.
You've received it. So you don't have 4 calendar days at this point to receive it because you've already received it. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So because you received it before you went under contract, once you went under contract, it just says you have up to 4 calendar days after acceptance to receive it, but that's already been done. So that timeline is off the table. Now we go to the next part that says after acceptance of the REPC by the buyer and seller and or receipt of the earnest money by the brokerage shall have. So now this is talking about after acceptance and receipt of
Don't you
earnest
have
money.
4 days, another 4
Yeah.
days after receiving it?
The brokerage shall have 4 calendar days in which to deposit.
Okay.
So this paragraph has 2 timelines, which is often misunderstood or forgotten about. Which means you have a potential of up to 8 calendar days to receive and deposit earnest money after acceptance. But the only way that 8-day window can actually happen is if after acceptance, you receive the earnest money on the 4th calendar day. And then after receipt of the earnest money, you deposited it on the 4th calendar day. That's the only way that the maximum of 8 days could be used. So people ask me, well, it's been 4 calendar days and earnest money is not deposited. I said, okay, well, that may be a problem. It may not be a problem. Let me ask you, when did you receive the earnest money check after you went under contract? I received it 2 days after it was under contract. Okay. So if you received it 2 days after it was under contract, then you had 4 calendar days after that to get it deposited. And in that example, it would be 6 days after it went under contract.
So I actually had an issue with this, but we got it resolved. So my client sent the ACH transfer on the 4th day, but you guys weren't going to receive it until that following Monday because she sent it on a Friday. So with that,
so the one thing about the ACH, it actually shows that it has processed the day they enter it.
Okay.
But but the bank, it won't show that it's posted.
Yes.
It's posted into our account until that Monday.
Okay.
I think the way that we take it is as that deposit is if we can show that if it's hit the bank, it's just not going to show in the funds until the next business day.
Yeah.
It still counts as when we can show that it actually it was deposited. It doesn't
Yeah.
have to show similar to, look at it this way.
Deposited, just
It's
not-
deposited, the funds aren't necessarily available there. So
Yeah,
you go to your own, you
So
go to
they
your,
were trying to cancel with us because they're like, well, it hasn't been deposited in 4 days. And so I was like, okay, well, it's been sent in 4 days.
so that's one of the things that it would probably escalate if it could to broker to broker. If we can show that it was deposited,
Yeah, so I sent a
So-
screenshot of like, hey, she sent
it was deposited.
Yeah, and but they're like, well, your brokerage hasn't, received it or anything. And so
This
like,
this is where there is no definitive answer to say, I have to show it as a deposit. It was deposited. The funds are not reflecting
yeah,
there because it's been a holiday weekend.
yes, it was a holiday weekend.
So that would be no different than, I mean, you go to some banks, they'll show, here's what your new balance is, but the available balance is this, because that's that waiting period
Uh-huh.
to show that the funds have cleared. So yes, the deposit, your available credit is this, which is different.
Uh-huh.
But tomorrow, once it is gone through their process, now the available is the full balance.
Okay.
So it kind of reflect the same thing. Obviously, to avoid any potential question, would I love to see the earnest deposit and the balance on the same day? Yes, because now I don't have to worry about having the conversation with that broker
Yeah,
with this, but I can look at it still. When we do our deposits at 4:30 every single day, we deposit it on that day and it shows that the money has been sent. But if I were to take an accounting or a trust account, that money probably would not show in that.
yeah.
in that
And it
final
was, so
balance.
it was a bank holiday. It was Good Friday, I think it was at the beginning of April or something. Or, yeah, so the banks were closed on because it was Good Friday. So
Whatever
that's
it would
why-
be. So
Yeah,
it
so
just,
that's why
it didn't reflect.
Yeah, it
That's
wasn't gonna be there.
But we
till
got
Monday.
we have the deposit,
Yeah,
that would still count.
okay, yeah, they're.
So I would have a
no,
tough
it's not-
time.
yeah.
I'm sure I would be arguing with their broker because that broker
Yeah.
would have the same situation that we're dealing with. And you're telling me that it doesn't say cleared funds, it just says deposited.
Yeah.
So I'd have the same argument, but we'd have to have that same conversation. Bottom line is
Yeah,
this,
sorry to go off
no,
topic.
that's fine, because you're leading down another path that is important. Where it says deposited, it doesn't, so this is another problem that typically occurs is you, the agent, you receive that earnest, let's just say you get a physical check, it's the easiest way to understand it. You receive a physical check within your 4-day window. And then many times you may come to us and at 4 o'clock on that 4th business day or 4:30 on that 4th business day, you like, oh, I made it, sweet. You slap down the check on our desk and say, woo, here it is. I need to get this deposited. It's due today by 5. Well, if you're bringing it out to me on the 4th business day, 4th calendar day at 4:30, it's more than likely not going to be able to get deposited because we've already run our deposits. So just what I'm implying is if you have 4 calendar days to get it deposited and you hold it, get it to us as soon as possible. Now, I understand if you got the check on day 1, let's say you got the check, say, on a Thursday night, and now day 1 where the brokerage has the 4 days, so Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, okay? Worst case scenario, we have until Monday to get it deposited. And if you're out of town or whatever, you're not in on Friday, okay, we'll get it to us Monday morning and you're fine, no big deal. I mean, that is the 4th calendar day, but you're giving us time to get everything and upload it. Now, is it possible that Monday is a holiday? Case in point, this upcoming weekend, Monday, the office is closed. So if you are in that situation and you have a physical check, when do you need to get this check to us? Today, like if this is you,
Right now.
after this call, you might want to rush in here and get the check to us so that we have time to get it deposited today so that you are fine in your contract. But this is the stuff that you just got to be mindful of is these dates are critical because, and this goes back to what your other question, ACH versus wire. That I said the client is not damaged in regards, funds were deposited. Sorry, it was a personal check versus a money order.
Yeah.
There was no damage that was there. Now, if that personal check were to bounce, funds didn't clear, maybe you got an argument that they were damaged because they didn't clear. Well, yeah, I mean, the money wasn't deposited, so that's a totally separate issue. But the next piece is, this is the thing that also happens. In this contract, where does it say that the money has to be deposited? If you could read that blurry writing.
Yeah.
Says money by.
I'll read it for you.
Brokerage Trust account.
Says the brokerage shall have 4 calendar days in which to deposit the earnest money into the brokerage real estate trust account. So whose brokerage does that get deposited in? The buyers or the sellers?
Buyers.
Okay.
I've seen
Any other answers?
I've seen somewhere it says either or,
Okay.
either the buyer or the seller.
Where have you seen they've actually had the language in it, either or?
I think I remember seeing it like on an MLS
Okay.
listing.
Okay. Because that's what the contract says. The brokerage. Doesn't say buyer's brokerage, doesn't say seller's brokerage, just says the brokerage. There's 2 brokerages typically involved in the contract, a seller and a buyer's. So it could be deposited in either one and you are in contract. Now, typically, it will be the buyer, since they're the one that's writing the earnest money,
Yeah.
it will be instigated by that buyer's brokerage. Now, some brokerages don't have a trust account that they deposit earnest money into. What do they typically do?
Do an addendum for it to have it held at a trust account for a title.
Okay, that's what they should do. And
Sometimes
they're
a lot of
getting
people don't
better.
do that, yeah.
A lot of the times they don't modify the contract, which they have to do. They just deposit it in a title company. And then they tell you afterwards, oh yeah, it's deposited in the title company. Well, now that is a breach of contract because the contract says, hey, where it's going to have, and the buyer could have damages by it being, the seller could have damages because that earnest money is now held at a title company versus held at a brokerage. And the reason why that is the case, a title company is bound by a different regulatory body. We're bound by the Division of Real Estate. Yeah. They're governed by the Insurance Commission. So our contract says, hey, if there's a defaulting party, then we can release earnest money to the non-defaulting party without any further written requirement. I mean, a title company say, I don't care what the contract says, I'm not going to release this earnest money until both buyer and seller mutually agree to have it released. And now that earnest money is held at the title company, seller wants it, buyer won't sign the release, and they can't get the earnest money.
Mhm.
That's the reason why that addendum that is drafted, which is a requirement, by the way, it's a title company addendum that says the earnest money will be held at the title company, and it has another disclaimer underneath it. It says both parties understand that additional authorization to get this released is possible as a requirement by the title company.
So I've had this happen in the past as well. I'll call the selling agent and be like, hey, my client wants to know if we can have it held at the title company. And they're like, oh yeah, that's fine. And we don't need to write an addendum. We don't need
They're wrong.
Yeah. And like, we don't need to spend time doing that. So say we do, and we have done this because I'm like, okay, well, he says that, yeah, we don't need to. He's like, I'm fine with not doing an addendum for it. And then we
What's your name again?
Parker.
Parker. So what I would do right out of the gate and say, hey, Parker, totally understand what you're trying to do. It would be easier if we didn't do that. However, actually, we do need to do it because right now the contract says it's going to be held at the brokerage and we're modifying the contract. So we actually do need to have an addendum. And the reason why I'm saying that, I just want to make sure that we send it over to you, that your client's going to get it signed so we can go ahead and move forward with this.
Yeah, and so this didn't happen, but what if this happened where they come back and like, oh, we held that title, and then they're like, oh wait, we never said that. But I was like, hey, I was on the phone with you, and you said that we didn't need to do one.
That's why you need to
Yeah.
have conduct.
Okay.
So if I'm not going to do it if it's just verbal,
Okay.
because now you're not
You
following
can't
the
come back.
contract.
Yeah.
Well, just what you're talking about. This is your real estate school stuff. It's called. There's something's called starts with an S. There's a legal term. Starts with an S. Called the Statute of Frauds.
Yeah.
So if you're like me, I had never heard of that until I got in real estate. So the Statute of Frauds, what that means is, in order for this contract to be binding, it must be in writing for real estate. If it's not in writing, it's not binding. And in that example, it's not only that because you haven't modified the contract, your client, if it said the contract says it's got to be held in brokerage trust account, and if he just said verbally, oh yeah, go ahead and put the title company, we don't need an addendum, and you do it,
Yeah.
your client is in default
Yes.
because you've now deposited with the title company when it's supposed to be deposited with the brokerage. You are in breach of the contract.
Okay.
Your client is.
Okay.
So follow the contract. Okay. And that's why I'm spending so much time on this paragraph, because now what you've done, and I say you, but we as the agent, we have put our client, their money at risk. And they now could, if I did that, the client's following my guidance and I instructed them, it's fine, we don't need to get an addendum, just go ahead and put it in the title company. They can't get their earnest money back and they're also in default. So they've lost their earnest money. Let's say it's $5,000. They come after me and they file a complaint with the division. The division says, well, yeah, you knew better, or you should have known better, Rob, that you couldn't do that.
And you can't prove it because he's not in writing. Even if he
I
did
just,
yeah.
whether the conversation took, because it was verbal, it's as if it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Contract says this, you didn't do it, Rob. Yeah, the division finds a complaint against me. So that's dealing with the public's money is critical. But the key thing I want you to get here, maximum of 8 days, broken up into possible 4, possible 4. All hinges on when you got the earnest money. If you got it on before the offer was accepted, the first 4 days are gone. Well, that means we have 4 calendar days to get it deposited. If you got it on day 1 after acceptance, okay, so then 5. You know, it all depends on when you got the earnest money. Any questions about that?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay,
Yeah, thank you.
all right. We'll move faster in other paragraphs. All right.
I'm sorry to hold you up on that, but we also need to remember now the new non-refundable earnest money
Disclosure.
disclosure.
Yes.
Okay. So the question was brought up. Our company drafted a non-refundable / contingency waiver disclosure. And the reason for that is because offers that you guys are writing are extremely challenging in today's market. And many of these offers are dealing with non-refundable earnest money, or you're waiving your contingencies, meaning you're waiving due diligence, you're waiving appraisal, you're waiving financing, which means your right to cancel the contract based on due diligence, appraisal, or financing are gone. And I'll just get there because this is an actual example. In Section 8 of the contract, we'll get there in a second. Section 8 of the contract, those are your contingencies that give you the right to cancel the contract. If you make your offer where it's not contingent upon due diligence, it's not contingent upon appraisal, and it's not contingent upon financing, There is no other area in the contract that gives you the right to cancel the contract, period. So you receive seller's disclosures. Oh, I don't like the seller's disclosures. That's good. I want to cancel. You don't have a right to cancel. So an actual example that we had on a transaction, an agent buyer said that the earnest money would be due 24 hours after acceptance, but they waived all of their contingencies. They thought that if they canceled the contract before the earnest money was due, then that was their way to protect, that was the right to cancel and protect the earnest money. And it was a $50,000 earnest money, by the way. That was incorrect. So that's why we created that disclosure that just says, hey, if you're offering non-refundable earnest money, your earnest money is non-refundable, even a minute after you go under contract. If your offer says non-refundable earnest money upon acceptance, you accept, you get accepted, and a minute later you change your mind, earnest money is non-refundable. If you are waiving your contingencies, that can put your earnest money at risk. That's what that disclosure is about. So yes, it's to protect you, make sure the client, because I guarantee what's happening. Well, I know it is happening because they're calling me. The clients are calling me and saying, hey, Parker never told me what this meant. I'm sorry, what was you signed this addendum that says non-refundable earnest money. What did you think that meant? Well, you never explained it to me. Okay, so that in itself makes no sense, but we've gone a step further. I'm like, okay, so you signed this addendum that says non-refundable earnest money, and now you sign this entire document that goes into explaining what non-refundable earnest money and contingency waiver is, and you're saying Parker still never explained it to you? Well, at some point, you have to take responsibility for you signing documents, and if you're choosing not to read it, that's up to you. But we still have an obligation to explain.
That disclosure has also helped a lot with explaining those contingencies, waiving those contingencies in the non-refundable, like showing them that physical form and explaining it to them without having that form has been able to help explain it a lot better to clients, in my opinion.
Good. I'm glad it's working because it's there to protect. Okay, so now we're going into the offer, kind of what's here. This entire paragraph talks about included items. And we as real estate agents, we advanced to a higher level of education when we became real estate agents because our vocabulary was expanded. And there is an F word that we learned in real estate that separated us from the general public. What was that F word? Okay, that was actually the better answer. That wasn't the answer I was looking for, but that actually is the better answer. I'll acknowledge that. It deals with included items. If something's going to remain in the home or take it with you. A fixture, right? Once we learned that new vocabulary word, it separated us from the general public. We come out there with this knowledge of like, you know what? That's a fixture. It's attached to the property, so that's included, right? But then technology came around and messed that whole thing up. Someone came up with this idea, this concept that, hey, now that TVs are no longer the size of a massive iron thing, they're actually small. Let's put it up above the fireplace. That's out of the way. It looks kind of cool. We can make it look like a picture frame and have our family photos on this stuff, and we'll just put it up there. It looks pretty cool, right? Until that seller goes to sell their house and they were planning on taking that thing with them. It's a television set. That's personal property. No. Not anymore. It's not, because it's fixed. It's attached, right? This is where, and both sides are right. Well, it is a fixture. It is personal property. It's attached. It says, Oh, what do I do? What do I do? And so fortunately, this particular contract has been updated to separate some things. This was updated 6 years ago, I think 6-7 years ago. Our old ones didn't, and we had to deal with that. But this right here is included, and where it says that, if I can read this, all. Okay, here we go. Satellite dishes, all installed TV mounting brackets, all and ceiling mounted speakers. Okay. Bottom line is the TV itself is not included in our contract right now. We specify that. But the mounting bracket is. Or if we had speakers that were installed here, those would be included. Now, the one thing that hasn't been addressed, this projector. The bracket is, but it doesn't say TV and TV or in projector. It should have that language, but that we still have problems with that where, okay, well, is the projector included? I would still argue that it is not, but the mounting bracket would be. So because TV project or movie theater is more common in today's world, I have one in my house. If I wanted to take that movie projector with me, I'd want to make sure that, hey, TV projector is excluded. Because if I don't, someone could imply, well, that's considered a TV. That is or isn't included. It is. But the bracket, that is part of the fixture. So we fixed some things, but some things are not really addressed. What's the other thing that has come out in the last 5 years that looks something like this?
Thermostat, yeah.
The Nest thermostat. Okay. We don't see it as much right now, but 3-4 years ago, we saw it a lot. And everyone has the new Nest thermostat. Oh, look at this. It's so awesome. Blah, 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 blah. And then the new buyer comes to the house and it's now been the one that it used to exist, the panel one. I'm like, hey, what happened to the Nest thermostat? Well, the seller would have to bring that back. But the buyers or the seller's like, well, no. I paid $250 for that thing. When in reality, they paid $150 because they got a $100 rebate, but they paid $250. It says right here, these two sentences are important. Unless excluded herein, this sale shall include the following items if presently owned and in place on the property: plumbing, heating, air conditioning, fixtures, and equipment. Now, if the person wants to remove the thermostat, the Nest thermostat, fine. Before you list the property, get rid of it, put the old one back on, and so you're not having to deal with anything. Otherwise, let's just say they want it for marketing and everything, even though they plan on taking it with you. Then if you're the listing agent, when you receive an offer, you better get the big confusion is on the MLS, it says Nest thermostat is not included on the MLS. But then the offer comes in and it doesn't say anything about that. And now the listing agent doesn't catch it. They go under contract and go to closing. It's done. They show up. Nest thermostat's gone. And the buyer's agent calls the listing agent and says, oh, where is the Nest thermostat? Oh, it wasn't included. Remember, it showed on the remarks in the MLS. MLS does not govern. This governs. The contract did not have it. Therefore, the listing agent or the buyer's agent, in that case, the listing agent screwed up because they should have countered with an addendum that said, hey, no, the Nest thermostat is not included. So in that case, the listing agent might be buying a Nest thermostat because the seller told the listing agent, hey, we don't want this we want this excluded. Now, you can always come back, hey, the seller signed it. Yeah, this, at the end of the day, it's between the buyer and seller. They're the ones at fault. Question is are you gonna go back to your seller over $150 Nest thermostat, not a $251, and try to make the seller pay for it? It's up to you. Usually I see the agent cover the cost. So that's what I mean. The agent's the one that's gonna have to fill it in. Okay. So know what's included, excluded. Just read this. Again, knowledge is power. All right, those that are online, let's go ahead and have you write, Russ is awesome. He'll appreciate that. That's your next keyword. So go in and type your name. Russ is awesome. That way we can show that you guys are here. All right, we're gonna start blowing through a lot of this stuff now. Section 2. This big long paragraph, some people get intimidated by it because they want to make sure they write it the right way. Don't be intimidated. It's not that difficult to do. But I'll show you what I still do to this day just to make sure it's done correctly. First line right up here, we say what the purchase price is going to be. 500 grand. Writing their offer up there. Okay. And say you're going to have $5,000 earnest money. So we'll put $5,000 earnest money right here. And they're going to do a 90-10 loan. So that means they're going to have 10% down and they're going to borrow 90%. So new loan amount will be how much? 90-10 loan on 500 grand. Bueller. You guys are probably too young to know what that means, by the way. I guess I'll give it to you. It'll be 450 is the loan amount. 90% of 500 is 450. That means they're going to come in with 10% down, which is 50. Okay. So I've done the hard part so far for you. Balance of purchase price. What number do I put here? Okay, got an answer of 50,000. Anyone want to agree with that?
55, right?
Okay, now I have an offer of 55. Anyone want to agree with that?
5,000 Earnest Money.
Now I have a
Actually,
offer 45.
Yeah, I went the wrong way. 45.
Okay, so I'm hearing 50, 55, or 45.
45. Because you already have 5,000 Earnest Money. Yeah.
We have consensus on 45?
Yeah.
All right, 45 is a winner. The answer here is 45. Usually people will put 50 because they need that as part of their down payment. Well, they don't realize that the $5,000 earnest money is part of their down payment. But regardless, whether you put 55 there, 50 or 45, what I tell people to do. Now, when it's simple numbers like that, it probably doesn't take much sense, but some people, they want it extremely accurate. So the purchase price is $532,000. They put down $4,225 as earnest money, and they're going to put down a 3% loan. And I don't know what that number is. So 15,000 something is their down payment, whatever it's going to be. So the numbers are not as easy as our example. And then they just put 500 here because that's the offer price. Well, in reality, when those numbers don't add up, because they put a 50, they put a 55 there, and the numbers don't add up. So I just tell people, I do this to this day. I'll get a calculator out because I want to double check it. If I add this, this, and this, does this number equal the number I have here? Hopefully it's the 500. If it's not, in our example, we would have been $5,000 or $10,000 too much. Well, what's wrong? Something's not adding up here. Go back and look at it. Oh, that's right. Okay. It's not 50. It's not 55 here. It's 45. Now those numbers add up to the 500. We're good. To this day, I will add that up. because sometimes you're dealing with $472,222 loan.
Yeah.
Because it's that accurate that they put even, okay, do the math. Do you have something?
Well, yeah, well, so on the balance, the purchase of cash, I've had clients in the past where they're like, okay, well, we planned on putting like 20% down, and then
It changed.
yeah, it changed. And so what
Great
I'm
question.
kind of told is just put to be determined there.
Nope.
Okay.
Doesn't matter because of the next.
No, then never do that.
Okay.
To be determined. Put the information here, and I'm going to give you the answer to your question
There's an
to show that you can change that number. Because up here, it says purchase price should be paid, provided in section 2.1.
buyer and lender.
2.1 through 2.2 below, any amount shown in section 2.1C and 2.1, whatever letter that is, may be adjusted as deemed necessary by buyer and the lender.
Okay.
So just say, hey, what do you plan on doing? 20% down? Great. Now you're disclosing what's happening.
Yeah.
And now 20 days later, they realize they can only put 10% down. You don't have to redisclose.
Okay.
You don't have to do any of that. It's already in the contract that gives the buyer and the lender to readjust what that number is going to be.
Be the same for the new loan part too, because like
That's part of C.
okay. Oh, sorry.
C and E.
C through
Okay.
E, I think is what it is.
Yeah.
So those
Okay.
three lines right there.
Okay.
So just put the number that's there. Don't do to be determined.
Okay.
Don't like that.
Okay.
You put it, now it changes. It's perfectly within the contract to do it. See? Is it okay if I use you as an example, what I said earlier? Because I'm not trying to attack,
No, you're fine.
I'm not trying to attack you in any way, but this is a great example where I'm assuming you haven't ever read that line before, or if you did read it, you didn't really pay attention enough to
Well, I read it once and I just
didn't pay attention because the example was never brought forth to your mind. But it is the language pretty clear.
Yeah.
It doesn't require a law degree to understand what was done right there, right?
Yeah.
And so now you know, oh, okay, I put to be determined because what if something changed? Well, the contract already puts the language in there, so you don't have to worry about to be determined.
Yeah. It's just the person that taught me how to.
I know.
Yeah.
I know. It's one bad behavior being taught. I mean, it's
Yeah.
over and over and over again. And so that's why you guys are in this class. That's why a lot of people may click because their first time getting their license. I guarantee someone who's been in the business for 15 years will be in this class and learn something because they've been doing it wrong for 15 years because the person taught them did it wrong and they've been doing it all along. So thank you for allowing me to use your.
When I write an offer, I take that last sentence and I review that last sentence. Like I have an offer that has a highlight, all the things I highlight when I'm talking to my client about, and that's in section 2.1. That last sentence is highlighted for me because it's a reminder for me to let
Make sure
my
you
client
address
know,
this.
hey, it doesn't matter like what we fill in C through E because of it says this right here. You and your lender can change it at any time.
Whatever you need
Okay.
to. Now, the only thing that it would matter is if you're changing from a conventional loan to an FHA loan.
Right.
That is not okay. It says buyer may apply to mortgage terms applicable to the buyer. If an FHA VA loan applies, see attached FHA loan addendum. So unless your offer included an FHA addendum that got accepted by the seller, you can't go that route. That's the big difference. So if you're starting conventional and now you're choosing to go FHA VA, the seller has to agree to that. You can't just unilaterally switch to that term and that it's okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But now if you started FHA VA, got that addendum signed, and your client wanted to go conventional, you don't have to give any disclosure that way because you've already got the addendum that has to be signed. If they take that route, you're now going the route that you can go one direction, you can't go the other.
So I also have a question on top of this. So say you have the FHA, it's all this is the addendum signed and everything, and you're under contract. Or I mean, sorry, no, you're at conventional, and then you have to go FHA, and you go to get the FHA.
And they say they won't sign it.
So,
I've had
yeah.
an actual example of this.
So does that cancel the contract, right? If they,
You haven't canceled it.
well, I mean, can the sellers cancel it, is what I'm asking.
No.
If they don't want to sign it.
Well, you're, the way that you phrase your question, you're leaving out some key pieces here.
Okay.
Does the seller have the right to cancel the contract because the buyer needs to go FHA? No, the seller does not have the right to cancel the contract until the buyer is in default.
Okay.
Up to that even though the buyer has to go FHA, up to that point, the buyer's not in default.
Okay.
But the seller, if the seller chooses, I'm not going to sign that FHA addendum, which means the buyer's not going to get the loan. So if the buyer does not initiate that cancellation before their right to cancel, then they're going to be they won't be able to perform on the loan because the seller's not going to.
Yeah.
So then the buyer would go all the way to closing, can't do the deal, they're going to be in default, and then their default remedy would apply. The seller wouldn't initiate any cancellation.
Oh, okay.
If the seller did initiate, well, hey, we've got to go FHA, so the seller does a cancellation, the seller would be in default for initiating that cancellation because the buyer was not in default up to that point.
Okay.
Now, I say that, is it possible you can have the buyer's father as an attorney that, I don't know, he's Johnny Cochran for all we know, but once he disclosed that, hey, they had to go FHA, and the seller said, we took that information as that they couldn't qualify, so that's why we initiated the seller's cancellation. That's a legal battle that we don't want to be part of.
Okay.
So my advice is to the seller, don't do a cancellation, because as of right now, the buyer is not in default. Is it possible that the buyer can go get a hard money loan?
Yeah.
Yes, they're gonna have to pay some more money. They can get a hard money loan and then they can come and refinance it as an FHA right after they close. Yes, they could. So buyers tell us right now they can't do it. That doesn't mean they still can't buy the house.
Okay.
So they're not in default yet.
Okay.
Okay? Make sense?
Yeah, thanks for clarifying.
Okay. Section 2, sell the buyer's property. This is, in today's market, when you represent a buyer that has to sell a home, is that a positive or a negative towards your offer?
Negative in this market.
I would say it's probably a negative.
Yeah.
If you're selling your house, you've got 10 offers that have been brought on your house, and 2 of them are cash with no, let's just say they still have contingencies, but they don't have a home to sell. And let's just say that the remaining 8 offers are all pretty close. They even pay you a little more money. Let's just say $5,000. You make $5,000 more, but all 8 of those require their home be sold. Which offer would you take?
Cash.
Well, hey, you can make $5,000 more money, potentially,
If this buyer's home sells.
if the buyer's home sells. In today's market, are we now seeing price reductions on listings?
Yeah.
So is it
Softening of the market type
a
thing?
little softening? So
Yeah.
is it possible that, hey, I'm giving you $5,000 more, and then the home doesn't appraise? Oh, well, all this other stuff that comes up versus cash now, close, no contingency. So yeah, it's a better offer per se, but now what if I say $50,000? And I'll also include the appraisal guarantee of $50,000. Now what do? You own the home.
Depends on.
You
my
own the,
circumstances.
yeah, you own the home free and clear.
Right,
So you don't have to get out tomorrow. You're not,
sure.
you got a little time on your hand that you might want to, let's roll the dice. Maybe I can actually make more money if I take this contingency, because it may take 3 months to sell the house. I'm going to roll the dice. Okay, either way, we don't know if it's going to make it a better offer or not, but I would say in general, it probably does not make it a better offer. And agents, these markets bring out in any, not just real estate, any hot market. I don't care if it's real estate, stocks, bonds. It brings up creativity. And there's a polite way of saying ethically challenged creativity, outright fraud creativity, it creates stuff, okay? Many agents, so if I'm a buyer's agent, I don't want to, the buyer, they don't want to disclose to the seller that their home has to be sold. So they don't include it, well, which is misleading, which is a form of contract. You have to have a meeting of the minds, and you could argue that by not disclosing, painting a true picture, that the other party did not know what they entered into. So you could create an argument that the validity of the contract is in question when you mislead. That's a legal battle. We don't go there. Our job as real estate agents is to facilitate the transaction, and we have a code of ethics that we have to abide by. Part of it is being truthful. If we know stuff, we have to do stuff. Okay, this is pretty simple. It says buyer's ability to purchase the property to obtain the loan referenced in section 2C above, and or any portion of the cash, that's the part that's important, and or any portion of the cash referenced in 2.1a above is or is not conditioned upon the sale of real estate covered by the buyer. So meaning, if any of my money that is coming from, that I'm claiming as a purchase, is coming from the sale of another property, if that is happening, if checked in the affirmative, the terms of the attached subject to sale of buyer's property addendum apply. Means, if any of the money that I'm putting here is coming because I'm selling another property, then I must use the subject to sell property. And I've heard it all. Well, the buyer has money in the 401k. They can buy the house without selling their home, but they don't want to. So we're not putting it, we're not including it, because we're going to put the home on the market, hope that it sells before, so I don't have to touch my 401k money. Okay, my question, when you're making the offer, I know what you want to have happen. Heck, I love the Friends episode of, some of you guys maybe like Friends, what's that, right? Difference of age gap. For one of the first earlier episodes, you have Ross sitting on the couch, and he finds out his wife's, their marriage is over, and he's like, I want to be married. And Rachel comes running through the front door of the coffee shop, and she's in her wedding dress, and she just ran out on her own wedding. And so, well, I just want to be married. And this wedding dress proposal opportunity comes running through the door, and Chandler right up, well, I want $1 million. Like, you know, all you have to do is say it and it'll happen, right? Well, we want to have our home sell without touching our 401k. I want $1 million, right? I might get it. If I keep buying the lottery tickets, I might get it. But if I don't, how am I going to get that money? I have to meet that performance based on what it is. So as of right now, how are you going to get the money? If you're going to get it from the 401k, then that's what you do. If you're going to rely upon the sale of your home, then that's what you need to disclose. Just our job is to guide. I'm not telling you this because when the deal, it happens all the time, they cancel because the home doesn't sell and they don't want to pull out the 401k. And now you, the agent, have been misrepresented on the transaction because you knew that that's what was happening. Whether it's true or not, that's the overlying picture, right? And we don't want to do that. We want to help facilitate the transaction. Okay, real quick, what's the difference between settlement and closing?
sign documents and stuff, and closing is when it actually records and funds.
If you didn't know who this wonderful, beautiful woman back here is, this is one of our TCs, transaction coordinators that we have at the company that helps keep you in line. And I'm not just joking about this. I promise our TCs and our staff probably know the contracts better than most of the agents in our company, which is also good to help keep you in line. So when they give you counsel, hey, you know, probably need to do it this way, because they're also coming to me and asking the questions, take what they say as probably pretty accurate. And if they don't know it, they'll tell you. She is correct. Settlement is when you go and sign paperwork, and this is the part that's always forgotten, and bring in any monies that are due. So your down payment, that 10% that you are making on the offer, you have to bring that into settlement. That is settlement. Closing is when the lender brings the remaining funds, and then it's also been recorded with the county. Funding and recording completed, that's closing. Why I'm bringing this up is I still have the problem, and I know we all do, we as agents, we intertwine those two words. The buyer asks, hey, when do I get keys? You get them at closing. That is true. You get them at closing, but you say, oh, well, it's settlement, you're going to get the keys. No, you're not. When they come in to sign paperwork, hey, is this where I get the keys? Oh, I've been telling all along they get it at settlement. It's actually closing. Sorry. We use intertwinable language with our clients, and it can be confusing. So make sure that we are doing our job and understanding what the difference is the two, and just that helps with our clients. When that,
It'd be okay. So like I've always, I don't know if this is wrong or correct. I would say, yeah, once it's been funded and it's been recorded with the states, I can get you keys.
keys are,
Is that
that's perfect.
Okay.
That's perfect. That's closing.
Okay.
That's when your keys they're eligible to get keys.
Okay.
Now, one thing that I would definitely specify, let's say that you're writing something that needs to be repaired. Throughout your negotiation, seller agrees to put a new furnace in. Okay. In that case, just say the new furnace shall be installed by a licensed certified HVAC contractor on or before settlement. Now you may be thinking, why is that important? Why can't you put closing? You can, and both are correct, but here's the difference. So Parker, you represent the buyer, I represent the seller, and today is our settlement deadline. You go and do your walkthrough. You're supposed to sign, what is it? 11:15. You're supposed to sign at 1 o'clock today. And I'm gonna, well, I'm signing at 1, the seller's signing at 1, and you're signing at 2. And you do your walkthrough right now at 11 o'clock. New furnace is not installed. And the contract was written, furnace is installed prior to closing. Is the seller in default at this point?
No, because we said closing, not settlement.
Okay. So now, does your buyer want to sign
They're
now
probably,
that the furnace has not been installed?
they're gonna probably be hesitant until I
Okay.
explain.
And by the way, we'll say today is the settlement deadline.
Okay.
So at 5 o'clock, settlement deadline has to occur.
Explain to them, hey, we it's in the addendum or contract that we have, it says at closing, not settlement.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, hey, but it's not installed.
They still-
Today's settlement.
Yeah.
I don't want to sign.
Now
So your client decides not to sign.
buyer's at default.
They'll be in
Yeah.
default. They have not signed. Is the seller in default for not having the furnace installed?
No.
No,
Yeah.
I mean, it's a holiday.
Yeah, I
If it
mean,
doesn't fund and record until Monday, they could have it installed any day
From now.
until it funds and records.
Yeah.
Let's say now Monday comes, still hasn't funded and recorded, your client signs, finally. Furnace not installed, 11, 12, 2 o'clock, finally funds and records. Boom, that's when the seller's now in default,
Yes.
but the contract has now been ratified. I mean, it's signed and done. And you now, it's like, how do the buyer wants to cancel because the seller's in default? Well, it's too late. It's already happened.
Isn't there like a,
Some shall survive closing. So that's another language that you can, on repairs.
yeah, because isn't,
I'm not saying that the seller's not responsible. I'm just saying that the ability, the buyer's hands become more tied
yeah,
when it's written that way. I didn't say that the seller is still not obligated to put the furnace in, but now that it's closed, it's become more difficult for buyer and seller to get the thing resolved. So what I propose is, if you put the language prior to settlement, now today's settlement is the deadline. If you're approaching 5 o'clock, you go sign. And let's just say the seller even goes and signs. Well, at 5:01, that has not been done. Now I can call the title company, hey, don't fund and record yet. Because right now, the seller still has not installed the furnace. See the difference? I got more leverage.
Yeah.
Seller wants to sell the house. Wait a minute. Seller, right now you're in default, by the way. Buyer could actually cancel the contract because the seller did not install that by the settlement deadline. But I can at least tell the title company, do not fund and record yet until we get this new furnace. Now the seller, crap, I can't buy my house now because I'm waiting on the seller. Fine, we'll call up and we'll get an HVAC guy here and we'll get it installed on a Sunday because that's what they need in order to get it done. Now they're going to pay higher. That was their fault for waiting the last minute. Doesn't matter. More leverage. So just be mindful of this stuff. This is what separates you from the other agent, because the other agent doesn't know what's happening here. And because we prepare our clients, get them in the right, you're in the driver's seat.
so isn't there like I don't know if this is accurate or not, but isn't there like kind of like a grace period after?
You're talking about, right, that within 3 days, the
Yes,
seller can
yes.
cancel. Great question. It happens all the time. People come up and ask me this question. You are not buying a car. Buying a car, you have a 3-day right of rescission.
Okay.
That you can come back and back out. Does not exist in real estate. Does not exist. It's funds and records, it's a done deal.
Okay.
Okay. Does it say 11:20? I just point possession. I point out these things just to make us better at what we do. We're being hired not as attorneys, even though we act as their counselor, we act as their lawn care service, their shoveling service, we do all their financial, we wear multiple hats per se, but our job is to help facilitate the transaction. That's what our job is. We give some advice to move things along. So part of that is, how can we make things smooth versus a pain in the butt? Some agents believe that they have to demonstrate their power, their positioning, their posturing to show that, oh yeah, I did this for my client. It has to be a win-lose situation to create their own value. That is not my way of thinking. My way of thinking is, what is it going to take to get both sides across the finish line? And it's a good experience for them. That they're not, it just hasn't been a nightmare. Now, if I have to go to fight, hey, I'm going to fight. My job is the other F word we learned. I have a fiduciary duty to my client, and I'm going to do that. But is it possible to actually do that and be civilized and actually be a human being. I know politics doesn't know how to do any of that. I love it. We raise our kids on, hey, you know what? If you're going to do this, maybe someday you can be the president of the United States. But yet the president of the United States, I don't care what party you are, it's on both sides. They are the worst example of how you should treat human beings in my mind. Sorry, my own soapbox. But here we got the highest position in the country, and that's the role model. I don't think it's there anymore. Why can't we as agents say, hey, you know what? We're coming from different perspective. We understand where you're coming from. I get it. Hey, sometimes I have to be a little bit more firm in what my answer is, but that doesn't mean that I treat you uncivilized. I can always control how I'm going to act. I can't control how you're going to act, but we can still do this. But where I'm going with possession, if the home is occupied, if I represent the buyer, is it probable that the seller may need a little bit of time to get out of the house when its closing occurs? Okay, so now is it also probable that my buyer wants to get in immediately after closing? Of course they do. Okay, so I can not have the conversation up front with my client. Absolutely, you can get in right, 1 second at Funds and Records. That's your house. You can get in, whatever. And I'm going to do my job, make sure that that's when you get in. So I don't talk to the listing agent, and I put it, possession is at recording, funding recording. Okay, great. I checked the box there. Upon recording, that's the box I checked. Even though on the MLS, it said 48 hours after recording. This governs. So I got that past sweet. The listing agent didn't see that they should have modified this with a counter. So my buyer is gonna be able to get the property right in. And the seller already told the listing agent, we need 48 hours. This is gonna be a nightmare if we don't have that. So the listing agent screwed up. They screwed up. And they still don't know. I don't mention, now that we're under contract, I don't say anything to the listing agent to say, hey, I want to make sure that your client knows. I don't say anything. Funding and recording happens. My buyer shows up with trucks to move in. Legally, they have the right to get in. The seller still thinks they have 48 hours to get out of the property. But typically what would happen is, right when it funds and records, hey, my clients are going to be there right now. What do you mean they're going to be over there right now? They needed 48 hours. That's not what the contract says. I know what's going to happen. The seller will not be out in 48 hours. They're not going to be out on that deadline. The buyer's going to have all these moving trucks coming up, and now they've got this added expense. The seller, which technically would be in default, you could argue is going to owe. I mean, this is the problem that is created because we as agents didn't want to have a conversation.
Can't communicate.
We just, I got my position, so I'm going to take it out. No, I can say, look, hey, my client wants to get into closing. I saw that your offer, you needed 48 hours. How really? I mean, they need it 48 hours. Let's say that we even got under contract. Let's just give the benefit of the doubt. We go under contract. Possession is upon recording. Hey, I noticed that. Just want to make sure that we're on the same page here. We got the offer that shows possession is at closing. Just want to make sure your client's prepared to get out of the house at closing. No, they weren't. Okay, at least that conversation now the listing agent has to have with their client early on, which is going to suck for the listing agent. But at least we don't, sorry, my clients, they need it upon closing. Your client needs to get out. They still may not get out, which is going to create a fiasco. So then I want to be prepared with my buyer. Hey, buyer, here's the evidence to show we've had the conversations that the seller needs to be out. I've just seen this many times. Seller just chooses not to follow that. And I would hate to have you show up with trucks waiting to move in and you can't move in because the seller's not moved out. Seller's in default, but that's not going to make the situation any worse for you. How important is this for you to be able to move in? Well, we want, I understand you want to. How important? So meaning if I can get the seller to be out in 24 hours, can you bump yours 24 hours? Like kind of we meet in the middle? It's up to you. I mean, because otherwise, if they are out, great. But if not, I just want you to be prepared. If you're adamant not going to budge on this, you might have a problem because the seller has not gotten out of the property. You see how I'm proactively trying to get off a problem? Now, if it happens, the buyer shows up. Yep, you're right, Rob. The seller still hasn't moved out. I told you, unfortunately, you're not going to be able to get in because you can't call a sheriff. A sheriff cannot go and get the sellers out of the property until they have a court order. And that's a 2 to 3 week process before they get a court order for that to happen. It doesn't work. I mean, this is the stuff that my job is to facilitate transactions. My buyer, they wanted to move in. Great. Now that they have the trucks. Yeah, it sucks, buyer. And I tried to prepare you. Now, if you want to go after the seller for how much your expenses are, well, you're going to have to do that in small claims court. Okay. Or fine, we'll give them 24 hours. Okay, fine, they got 24 hours. Now, same thing happens. We gave 24 hours. My buyers did it. And they show up, they're still not out. At least it's not, Rob, you are just a terrible agent. Why didn't you take care of it? There's only so much I can do, right? Our job is to facilitate the transaction. So if I know that the seller has to get out, I'm going to make it my offer. Get out in 24 hours, 48 hours. Buyer and seller are more willing to make adjustments to get under contract and less likely when it's time to close. Just if it's a vacant house, go ahead and put recording. They want to probably close, get out. So just be mindful of that stuff.
I just dealt with this.
Did you?
Yeah. And basically and it was a positive thing between myself and the agent. Basically she called, she said, hey, like, I understand we have this as
Possession.
But we may need a couple extra days. And I said, okay, let me chat with my client. We basically came back and said, yeah, that's great. If we need to file an extension, that's fine. But we will not close until all of her stuff is out.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And so, yeah, just let us know.
Just get a resolve.
She was out in 2 days.
There you go.
And the listing agent texted me and said, hey, seller is out. My client's out. We can actually close early, but we just decided to just keep the
Keep it the same
original,
date. Yeah,
just keep the original settlement date.
Yeah,
So
that way it
it
works
was
too.
great. It was
Good.
awesome.
What would be a better thing to protect your clients? Because I've kind of run into this issue a few times where, like, hey, the sellers need either like possession to be like either 30 days or a lease back 30 days.
Get the lease. Do
Okay.
not say, people make this mistake. Possession's 30 days out and they don't do a rent back agreement.
Uh-huh.
So who's paying utilities? Is it the new owner? Is it the seller?
Okay.
Who pays damages if something happened? Even if it's 24 hours, the better answer, I know that the other side's not going to want to worry about it, but the better answer is at closing, that seller becomes a tenant. Even though if it's only for 24 hours, they're technically renting the property for that 24-hour period. So if you were to get the 30-day, 60-day lease back agreement every time, that's the best answer.
Okay, that's going to protect the buyer. Or
Both sides.
Both
Both
yeah.
sides, because it's
Yeah.
clear what happens.
Okay.
I'll say this, if you're going beyond 3 days of possession, then absolutely use the lease back. If it's 3 days or less, you still have problems, but they're typically not as big a problem. It's typically easier.
Okay.
So best answer, always use the 60-day. But I understand if you brought a 60-day agreement to another agent when there's only a 24-hour possession date, I'm like, are you a rookie? Well, I mean, it's just perception stuff. Just, hey, look, we just want to make sure all parties are clear. That is the best answer, but definitely 3 days or more, use one of those.
Okay.
Okay. Section 5, This is more so to protect your license. When do you need to get a buyer broker signed? If you're representing a buyer.
When should you or when do you?
We'll say the when must you? We'll start there.
Before you write up an offer?
Okay. And when should you?
Probably the first time you go to show home, or
Say first time you meet.
yeah, first time you meet, yeah.
So yes, the division rule requires that before writing up a written agreement, agency must be established, whether that be listing, representing a listing, or representing a buyer. Seller, buyer, seller. Because if I go to list a property before I write up, that's a contract too. I have to establish agency as part of that agreement. So, and then the other, when should you is as soon as possible, because anybody can argue that implied agency exists based on your actions, but that also could be implied unilaterally, meaning I'm doing things for you, Parker, and I think that we are establishing agency. You just think I'm being kind. So, but the way that we both understand that agency is created, once we've established a written agreement that shows that, yes, I represent you. So the earlier you get that done, the better. This, agents and brokers have misunderstood what this paragraph means. There have been, and I had this happen several times, brokers, by the way, that did this. This is all that they would sign that showed that they established agency. This is not an establishment of agency. This is a confirmation that the agents and brokers are acknowledging that prior agency has been established. So it's a confirmation that it's occurred. Okay. All right, seller's disclosures. This is always a big one. You guys, everybody's familiar with in section 24 of the contract. We have a seller disclosure deadline, 24A, right? Okay. So when are the seller's disclosures due to the buyer?
On the date that you put in that section 24A or whatever.
The date? Or is there more information to that?
Right, yeah.
You're half right.
Yeah, well, the date and time.
Okay.
Yeah.
So 5 p.m. on that date, the seller must provide the seller's disclosures to the buyer. What are the seller's disclosures?
Everything.
Yeah.
Okay, wait a minute. That's impossible. It's not that. Because the seller's disclosures are this document, by the way, used to be 7 pages, now it's I think 16.
16 now.
Just don't freak out about that. There's not 8 new pages or whatever of information. It was the formatting. As part of I'm part of the forms committee, and we made it so now the seller can actually fill the old one. There's no room to fill in any information and answer the questions appropriately. We've now given room to fill things in. There are things that were added, permits, the water shares, a couple of other things that were added, but they didn't change 8 new pages worth of information. So yes, those are the new seller's disclosures. But those are the seller's disclosures. So does that mean that's all I have to give to the seller or to the buyer? Those seller's disclosures?
The following documents.
Okay. Section 7. This is what the seller's disclosures are. Everything that apply in this category. So if you are taking a listing, how many of you have you guys ever taken a listing before? Okay. Did you have to order a title report?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. You may not have realized that you did, but yes, you did order a title report because you worked with a title company, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, they sent it, yeah.
They sent it over to you,
Yeah.
okay?
And then,
How long did it take for you to get a copy of that title report?
well, when I sent them the contract, I think it took a couple days.
From when you sent them the contract?
Except the
Or
listing.
the exclusive right to sell,
Okay,
yeah.
okay, that, okay.
Yeah.
Better.
That's why.
Your first answer where I thought like the REPC,
Yeah, sorry. I meant
I know.
exclusive, yeah,
that happens too. That's why I wanted to clarify.
Yeah.
Okay, so you sent them a copy of the ERS.
Yeah.
So let's say that you got the ERS signed yesterday. What would you normally do? And if it's okay, I'm just gonna use. And by the way, everything I'm saying as an example, I've made mistakes myself throughout time. So it's not like I've never done anything wrong and I'm now here to just pick up. No, we've all made mistakes. It's sometimes we just don't realize we're making mistakes. So you take a listing last night, 7 o'clock. What would you do? What would you do?
so the ERS to title to get the title report, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
And how long do you think? So today's Friday. You sent it today. So you probably, when do you think you would actually get,
Monday. Probably,
Okay.
yeah.
if knowing that it's a holiday? I mean, well,
Oh, yeah.
Monday's a holiday.
Yeah,
If you got it on Tuesday, great. Okay, so they were moved pretty relatively quickly,
uh-huh.
but there's a good chance that it might not get there till say Wednesday or Thursday, right?
Yeah.
Good chance.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, are we still in a hot market right now?
Somewhat, yeah.
Are homes selling still pretty quickly?
Yeah, they are.
A normal market, by the way, is 60 days on the market, 60 to 90 days. That's a normal market. We're still, days on market is probably still
16, I think.
I think the solid count, I think it does have 16 days. So yeah, we're still in a hot market. So is it the listing that you took? You got paperwork signed day one, Friday, today's up on the market. Is it possible that you're going to go under contract over the weekend?
Most likely.
Pretty high probability it's going to go under contract. And then the buyer's agent, what do they typically give time-wise for a seller to provide seller's disclosures?
Typically 4 days.
I'd say it's probably, between 2 to 5.
Yeah.
3 is probably
Yeah.
more of an average, 3 days.
Yeah.
Not business days, calendar days, right?
Yeah.
So you go under contract either tonight, Saturday. Let's just say Saturday, you go under contract. Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, holiday.
Mhm.
And we already said it's possible Wednesday, Thursday, you might get the title report.
Yeah.
See where we're going with this? So now you come Tuesday at 5 PM, you don't have the title report. Is the seller in default?
Yes.
Okay, this is what I'm trying to help you guys see. The seller's disclosures are everything in this list. A is the 16-page seller property condition disclosures. That's one of 11 items. Great, you got those filled out. Okay, great. Was the home built before 1978? This one's easy because for you to put that on the MLS, it requires that to be filled.
Yeah,
So thankfully, the MLS has helped us solve this problem. Because before they did that, this was a problem. Okay, so we're protected there. But C, title commitment. A copy, what if the home you're listing, it's part of an HOA?
you gotta get the HOA, CCNRs and.
CCNRs. You need to get the most recent minutes budget. Working with an HOA, is it easy or hard?
Difficult,
It's tough to get that stuff, isn't it?
Yeah.
Okay. If there were any long-term, short-term lease and any the other thing that's often forgotten. What if it's a rental that your client is selling? Do they have a property management company that is managing their property? You need to provide a copy of that with the disclosures. By the way, everything I'm talking about right now, this is where I'm saying the 15-year veteran is sitting here like, I had no idea. I thought I only had to provide the seller's disclosures here. Well, you do. You just thought that the seller's disclosures were only item A. That's one of 11 items. And if you have a problem, then I send you to this guy. So before he joined our company, this is Sam Bell, by the way. He used to, in another life, practice full-time law. He had a law firm that he created how we established everything. When there's problems occurred, you are now you're in a lawsuit, here's the guy you need to call to potentially represent you as an attorney. But then he got wise and decided, I don't want to represent clients anymore. So we'll go represent this Everest group. And he's the president of our company. So thanks for joining us, Sam.
I love a good seller disclosure.
Yes, you do. So when you take a listing, knowing you got one of two things, you either got to, when you're going to meet with the client, hey, I know that it's going to take me 3-4 days to get the title commitment, to get the HOA docs. So, hey, let's make the listing effective, like we're signing today, but it's not going to be on the MLS for a week or whatever. We're going to make the effective date on that. Actually, our contracts give us the ability to sign the contract today, and we'll make the listing effective a week from now.
The exclusion.
No, you don't have to use the exclusion. Our contract, we actually, if you use our, well, you should be using,
Yeah.
and Section 21 Everest contract, don't use the one on the MLS. Ours is much better.
Way better.
There's a lot of things that we've added that help our company and protect us. This is one of them. The one on the MLS, your listing is effective once all parties sign the document. Our contract says, hey, I'm signing the document today, but we're going to make it effective a week from now. But during that week, nobody else can list the property because it says, hey, you're the seller, you acknowledge that we take the listing and no other person can represent you in this interim. And so now when our listing is effective, that's when we have everything to go. So I'll meet with the client, take the listing today. Hey, let's make sure, let's get it up on the market next Thursday. Now I'm ordering photos. I'm talking to a title company, getting the title report. If I have to go to the HOA, I'm getting all the CCNRs, getting everything. So on Thursday of next week, when I put it on the market, I have everything. And this is my TC, by the way, that I'll use. Is that pretty accurate, what I do?
Yeah.
Here it is. It's all done. On day one, so now if I did go under contract on that day, even though I still have 2-3 days, I've got everything already ready to provide. Now, it's possible that the HOA still I can't get a hold of or try whatever. Yeah, that's my biggest challenge that I'm dealing with, trying to get those docs. But at least I now know before I get an offer, hey, if I know that I get an offer, I'm either going to say, we need 5-6 days to get the disclosures, or I'm going to say something that's going to protect me to make sure that I can meet whatever I agree to. But that ends up being every one of these disclosures are applied. Going back to the $50,000 earnest money scenario. If seller does not provide this by the deadline, is the seller in default? I'll help you out. Yes. If you didn't provide that seller that title commitment, the seller is in default. The buyer could then cancel the contract, and option A as a default remedy for that buyer would be that the earnest money is returned to the buyer, and then the seller would owe the equal amount. So the seller would owe that buyer 50 grand because we didn't get a title commitment to them in time. See how important this is? I mean, let's just say you got it to them a 501. From the grand scheme of things, this 5 p.m. 501, is it really that big of a deal outside of the fact that default versus not? No, okay. When I'll use this example, I say this all the time. There's only a problem when there's a problem. What the heck does that mean? Of course, that makes absolutely no sense. Well, think about it. Right now, let's just say you delivered sorry, Barbara, I keep picking on you. I'll use myself as the example.
I don't care.
I'm implying like you're doing. I'm like, no, it's just
I probably am.
yeah. I deliver the title report at 501. So is that a problem for my buyer? They're due at 5, and I got them delivered. Sorry, I represent the seller, not the buyer.
Yeah.
I represent the seller, and they're due at 5 p.m. today, and I deliver them at 501. Is that a problem for my seller?
Yes.
That is a problem. So my first question, there's only a problem when there's a problem. Right now, there is a problem. However, buyer, not a big deal. Hey, just send us over an addendum that the seller's disclosure deadline is extended to 7 p.m. No problem. Buyer and seller willing to work it out, even though it's $100,000 earnest money potentially. Or it was 100,000, in this example, $50,000. Buyer and seller want to work it out, no big deal. Great, I send it over an addendum. Seller disclosure deadline is extended to 7 p.m. on today's date. Now buyer and seller sign that before the deadline. Now my client is no longer in default. We've now modified when they were due. I deliver them at 5:01. Now the deadline's at 7 p.m. My client's no problem. So now that problem is no longer a problem. So my example, or even what I said, there's only a problem if there's a problem. There was a problem, we got it solved, so there's no more problem, done. Okay? But now you get the parties that don't want to work it out. I deliver at 5:01, buyer's like, you're in default, we're canceling the contract based on seller default, we demand the earnest money. It's only a minute. It's not that big of a deal. That problem is still a problem, therefore it's a problem. Does it make sense? So it depends on what we can do to work things out. Do you have another question?
I did, but it doesn't have to.
I got
It doesn't have to go with this.
Yeah. We talked about section 8 a lot. I mean, where we talk about, so section 8 is your get out of jail free card, right? 8.1 is due diligence. 8.2 is the appraisal. 8.3 is the financing. When you are waiving, we already talked about the disclosure, you guys are good on that. If you waive these conditions, you're waiving your right to cancel, period. So just be mindful of what's there, but also don't get lost in the games that are being played. Buyers are making offers that'll say they're waiving the due diligence condition. They're waiving section 8.1, but they make it contingent upon 8.2 and 8.3. And in 8.3, this line right here, they put 0. By putting 0 in this line right here, you're basically giving yourself a due diligence deadline. What this means is, if you are canceling, now I'm not going to, if you're canceling for a due diligence reason, meaning like the condition of the home or whatever, that's what you should be canceling for. I'm not trying to imply that you can cancel because the carpet isn't in good condition, that you can cancel based on that on financing. I'm not implying that, but to some extent, it can be interpreted that way. This paragraph here says, if you cancel after the due diligence deadline, but prior to the financing deadline, then whatever dollar amount is in this category will be given to the seller. So let's say that we have that $5,000 earnest money, and this is blank. Well, that means that if, and we go under contract with that, that means that, remember, we waived due diligence deadline. So that's where the buyer had the right to cancel without any financial commitment. But because we have 0 here, when the buyer cancels based on financing, even though you're the listing agent that says, wait a minute, you told me if we didn't fix the furnace, then you're going to cancel. Does that sound like a due diligence reason? I'm here to say, yes, it does.
It could also be a finance.
I'm just giving you devil's advocate, or I'm just giving you an argument. If my buyer has to now pay for a furnace, does that make it less money that they have for their down payment?
Yes.
Yes. So could that, now they have less money that they wanted to put as their down payment, which means that it could impact what their mortgage payment's going to be? Could that make it more financially challenging for them to buy the house? All those answers are yes. And because the buyer has the right to cancel based on their sole discretion, in today's market are realistic, are interest rates increasing?
Yes.
Okay, interest rates also increased. So the buyer no longer qualifies or doesn't want to buy the house because it's no longer in their best financial interest. So they decide to cancel based on financing, even though we talked about the furnace is the issue. And now if that happened, the buyer cancels and the seller gets no money. So you basically gave the buyer the right to cancel kind of for whatever reason. So where I'm going with this is if you represent the seller, we need to do our job. And if I want to separate due diligence versus financing, well, great, then then we should do it. So my rule of thumb when I represent a seller is whatever our buyer and seller agree as an earnest money amount to accept, I'm going to put half of that in this field. So if it was $5,000, the buyer and seller agree on earnest money, then by default, I'm going to put $2,500 here. Now, if the buyer cancels after the due diligence deadline, even if it's a minute, a day, or up to the financing deadline, if they cancel, great, they have the right to cancel. It sucks for the seller, but at least now they get $2,500. Unless, there's always a caveat, unless they're canceling based on the appraisal. Now, if they cancel based on the appraisal, home doesn't appraise, buyer and seller can't come to agreement. Now they're canceling based on 8.2 and not 8.3, which means that they would then get their earnest money back. So the way that you have to cancel, I got all this in 7 minutes. The way that you have to cancel to show that you're canceling based on the appraisal and not financing, you have got to include a copy of the notice of appraised value with your cancellation. So when you send over a buyer's notice of cancellation, you're going to check box number 2 and have a copy of the notice of appraised value with it. That is your evidence that you're canceling based on appraisal and not financing. If you don't send a copy of that notice of appraised value with your cancellation, you're canceling based on financing, which just cost your client $2,500. So make sure that we're doing the right thing. Okay. Section 10, this is what the default, sorry. I'll go to 16, we're just talking about default. Default remedies, they're the same thing for both buyer and seller. There are 3 remedies that exist. A, earnest money. B, performance. And C, whatever liquidated damages they deem necessary. So for a buyer, if the buyer's in default, the seller will be able to, option A, can keep the earnest money. Or seller can go to court and sue for specific performance, enforce the contract. So the court basically says, yep, seller, you win. The buyer is going to be obligated to perform on the contract. And option C, the earnest money gets returned to the buyer, and then they pursue whatever liquidated damages they deem necessary. So let's say that the seller felt that they've been damaged up to 10 grand and earnest money is only 5. They give the earnest money back to the buyer and they go and sue for their liquidated damages in court. And if the court wins, now the buyer owes 10 grand in damages versus the 5. And it's vice versa. If the seller were in default, same remedy, it's in reverse order. So the key thing is option A, the earnest money we would return to the buyer that they brought, and then the seller would owe 5 grand. That's the difference. Okay. Option A is typically what's utilized because going to court costs money and time. It's very simple. Paragraph 18, big deal. So we didn't go over, but in paragraph 8, it said when you're going to issue a cancellation, it says that the buyer must provide written notice of cancellation. That's in paragraph 8. So is a text written notice? Save time. The answer is yes. That's written notice. If I'm sending you a text, hey, I'm canceling the contract, that is written notice. However, the part that people, and so that it happens all the time, they send an email, hey, my buyer's canceling, or they send a text, we're canceling the transaction. They think they've fulfilled the contract obligation. And in paragraph 8, they would be correct. But in paragraph 18, it tells you all what must happen with all notices. All notices must be A, in writing, which a text and an email would count. B, signed by the buyer or seller giving the notice. And C, delivered to the party by the deadline. So our staff, if you've received email, hey, I need proof of delivery confirmation of this notice. If you don't send everything through .loop, which tracks the history where it's been done, if you send an email of a cancellation, our staff's going to say, hey, we need to show delivery confirmation that you delivered that notice by the deadline. Because if you don't, then your client might be in default. So we've got to have all three of those. So a text or an email does not work unless the email will work if you include the signed buyer's notice of cancellation in that email. But then we're going to just need proof that you delivered it before the deadline. So the easiest way for you is in .loop, when you send that document to the party, send it in .loop, because now we have a history that it was sent before the deadline. It's all right there. Okay. We already talked 5 p.m. deadline is the date on whatever's on the contract. Last thing I'll talk about is going to be acceptance. An understanding of what acceptance is. Remember, we talked about to form a contract is the Statute of Frauds. You have to have included. Acceptance occurs when two things happen, not one of two things, but two things. The document or whatever, the contract, whatever it is, must be signed by the parties and it must be communicated. Doesn't need to be, it used to be delivered. We used to say that had to be delivered. Just needs to be communicated. So if you're communicating, this is why I'm bringing this up. Many agents, they'll say, oh yeah, my client's going to sign the contract. Or we're going to accept we accepted your contract when the client has not signed it. What you're intending to say is, my client does intend to accept the contract. They're not home right now, but verbally they've allowed me to tell you that we're under contract. But a verbal under contract is not binding. But if you're going to give that type of a clarification, make sure you cover yourself. In order to have acceptance, this must be signed. So if your client says, yes, we're going to sign it. Okay, well, let me know when it's signed. Otherwise, in the meantime, I can communicate to the other side that verbally we're going to go with under contract. But until it has been signed, don't communicate that you're under contract, because you're not.
Yeah, it sucks, especially when I tell my clients like, oh yeah, hey, they're going to accept their contract.
And then another offer comes in that's
Yep.
better, and
Yep.
that's right. So you're just compounding the problem.
Devil's advocate, but so does the acceptance need to be valid in order for it to be legally under contract? Like within a deadline?
You just answered your own question.
Yeah.
So
I'm just saying, 'cause that happens all the time.
yeah, an acceptance would have to be valid to be
Has to be
binding,
in-
legally binding.
Yeah,
So
signed
the
in deadline.
question I think you're asking is, do you have to have proof to show that it was, I mean, if there's ever something in question, your date and timestamps, that's how you're going to get your proof. But I mean, that's why if I have a text that says, yes, we are under contract, your offer was accepted, and then I have signatures that appeared after my text of a date and time, well, clearly we were not under contract and accepted when that happened. So the agent, you could argue, violated the code of ethics and division rule because they misrepresented what actually happened. So don't be one of those agents. Just do what's there. Make sense? Okay, I know we skipped a lot. I know we handled a lot in certain sections. I know some of it may have been like a fire hose coming at you, but hopefully we're out of time now. Hopefully this is helpful. Hopefully this is good. And we're here to answer questions, but definitely if you want to do things right and help, use the TCs. They will make your life much easier and they'll keep you in line. Okay, guys?
Awesome.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
That was very helpful.
Good. Thanks, guys. Enjoy. Bye-bye.
Okay, so I have to ask you a question.
Thanks, Rob.
So I was working over there and